Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and as you can see by my humble surroundings, I am once again flying solo here. It's a one-man band, a one-man show, as all of my other colleagues and cohorts and partners in crime, brothers from other mothers, sisters from other fathers. I don't know how that works, man. Everybody's so busy. Hey, it's cool. You know what? It's still the NFL offseason. Not a whole lot going on, at least not anything in particular that I care to address, like maybe some other folks will blow up maybe some Devin Bush tweets or anything like that. My man, I'll tell you what, and I'm going to be talking about him a little bit as one of the centerpieces of the conversation for today. Wow. He's self-motivated. Everybody's like, oh my God, did he go crazy? The bad part is that you actually saw a player, Antonio Brown, go crazy on social media. I think Devin Bush is just having fun with it. Man, he's using it as a motivation instead of letting it drag him down, letting him bring himself down. You know, people say, hey, this guy sucks. This guy's no good. He's a bum, this, that, and the other thing. And he's just sifted through the noise and creating his own fun there. And all the more power to him, because anybody who's taking anything that's going on there seriously, man, just disconnect. Just disconnect from the internet and take a step back. But I like that he's going to be self-motivated. It really shows something for 2021. Some other news, Ben Roethlisberger in the best shape of his life. Anyone who isn't in Pittsburgh and doesn't already know that, like all of the Steelers fans absolutely know what's going on there. Of course, he has a great diet, this, that, and the other thing. The guy's been criticized for some really stupid stuff. He wears a big, heavy, one of these bubble winter coats when he was injured like 2 years ago. The whole coming back from the elbow surgery, having the year that he still had, third and pass attempts and pretty high in everything. He didn't have like the yards, but touchdowns, he was still like top 10, could have been top 5 maybe if he played all 16 games. He sat the final week just, to get rest, hopefully. That didn't work out the way you would have liked it to, but just call it the way it is, man. I mean, the guy is still a top flight competitor in the league, and it's great to see some of these things trickle out like that, because you get some clowns that are various analysts and talking heads on the different sports shows, and they're always ragging on Ben for one reason or another, and I'm going to be excited to see what he ends up doing this upcoming season. It kind of goes hand in hand with the whole last episode, kind of piggybacking off of that and saying the whole Rodney Dangerfield effect. The Steelers, they get no respect. The defensive unit I'm going to talk about today, a little bit of an elaboration of something that I wrote, a piece for SteelCityUnderground.com, the website, the original OG platform here. I'm still a writer by heart, love to talk football, and I could usually enunciate more things on this video and audio platform. Maybe I should say audio visual, be real fancy here. We're going to use the $1 million words here. But it's like there's a lot to say about the Steelers defense, because in some cases they're respected, but I don't know that they're respected enough. And I got a few things to talk about with that, because some of the narratives that are out there are just they're ass backwards. There's no other way of saying it. And just before I get into that, just one last push here as a media partner with Chase Claypool's youth pro football camp, or Pro Camp Football Camp, ChaseClaypoolCamp.com, promo code Steel City. If you still have any boys or girls, or know anybody with a boy or girl grades 1 through 8 who will be interested in that, that is coming up right around the corner here. So go to ChaseClaypoolCamp.com to check that out. It's not just Chase Claypool, but he is one of the centerpieces there, and the kids get quite the experience. They get a souvenir and some other things there, as well as a football education from some of the top coaches in the area's high school and colleges, as well as Mapletron himself entering his second year. We really don't have a whole lot of bad things to say about the Steelers wide receivers, and hopefully we could check some things out before camp. Still trying to get some clarification. I believe the Steelers will be opening camp next week, just not to the public, so we'll know about that just around the corner. No concrete word on it as of right now. Now watch, I say this, and usually what happens is the news dump It doesn't matter what kind of news you follow, but especially for sports news, NFL news in particular, the deadlines are always 4 p.m. for the league office. And before everyone gets off for the weekend, they want to clear the desk off and, wash their hands of everything. So we'll see what ends up coming up. Might be invalidated very quickly here. I was talking about this to somebody else not too long ago. A lot of the podcasting format, you're dealing with sports. Not everything is what we call in the marketing world evergreen content. Doesn't last forever, but you know what? There's still things you can go and look back on that are fun. There's still interviews that we've done with various players talking about their careers that are still good, and quite a bit of the content here. I've had a few people, thank you, by the way, for your compliments here for the platform, for all of us hosts and contributors that work here at Steel City Underground. We work hard, and I'd like to think that a lot of the stuff that we have said over the last few months, it's still valid all the way up until they start with that first kickoff in week 1 up in Buffalo. So check that out. Got a Hall of Fame game around the corner here. Hall of Fame ceremonies around the corner as well. So it's time. We're getting excited about football. But why isn't everybody as excited? Like the Steelers, like I was saying, a lot of people, myself and the professor, Zach Meckler, we came on this show. We've still got one more to do as he's in the middle of his life processes on the side here in the offseason himself. We're going to cover the Baltimore Ravens, hopefully. I don't have to do that solo without him because I value his input, and he kind of counterbalances maybe a little bit of my bias. But we've already done the Bengals, and we've done the Browns, and we've also said, you could still kind of figure out where and how we feel about the Baltimore Ravens, too. We think it's a 3-horse race between everyone but the Bengals for the AFC North title. And in saying that, whoever wins the North could win with just 10 or 11 wins, even though they're adding an extra game, 17. Everybody has a tough schedule this year. And I don't know. I don't know. Everybody just thinks automatically of the Steelers' offense last year. They think about the year before. A lot of the stats I see on Ben, they're cherry-picking numbers from, you have Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges playing. And the Steelers' defense has been solid through all of that. They've led the league in sacks each of the last 4 years, or at least a share of the lead. But they've been the top dog there. And they haven't lost a whole lot. I'm going to talk about the actual depth chart, the roster, and some of the depth there, too, that I didn't get to cover because, quite frankly, once you get to about 11 or 1,200 words, it's a little overwhelming to put all of it into. It's the 10 pounds of crap in the 5-pound bag. We don't ever want to do that to anybody who's trying to read something. Nobody got time for that, right? But the Steelers' defense, they finished 3rd overall in points scored by Team Baltimore Ravens. Just a few points, 9 actually, fewer than the Steelers did. They were 2nd with the Los Angeles Rams, only giving up 296. The Steelers gave up far fewer yards defensively than the Ravens. We're talking about almost 400 yards, 52-76 to 48-93. And I'll start sorting some of these too, but I'm still looking. Let's see, plays. When we look at some of this, the Steelers, they still gave up, let me see, they're almost top 5 in all of these categories, 996. They're 6th overall in the amount of offensive plays run against them. Yards-wise, anytime I sort this and it's doing from the bottom up, it's the Detroit Lions last year. Whew, so bad. But the Steelers gave up the 3rd fewest yards overall last season. Let me see, yards per play, 2nd overall, 4.9 to the Rams with 4.6. So the Ravens are still in here as a top 10. What you're not going to see is that the Cleveland Browns end up being anywhere near the top of this list. Actually, when you start getting into the Browns, they're usually middle of the pack or lower in a lot of these statistical categories. The Bengals are almost in the same spot, actually, believe it or not, as well. In some of these cases, the Bengals gave up just a handful of fewer plays. And some of this is just like, is it really worth nitpicking? 10:35 for the Browns versus 10:21 for the Bengals. But just covering the AFC North here overall. The Steelers were 2nd in the league in creating turnovers with 27, only to the Miami Dolphins 29. When you get into passing yards, the Steelers gave up the 3rd fewest passing yards in the league. They gave up the 8th fewest. Well, they're actually tied. I'm sorry. When I do this, they're actually tied for 5th with the Giants, Patriots, and Ravens. 22 touchdowns that were given up. The fewest, again, were the Rams with 17. The Dolphins, Broncos, and Washington football team all with one fewer than the Steelers, and the teams tied with them 21-22 there. So overall, you're still looking at top 5, top 10 type production. First downs given up by the Steelers, second fewest in the league, too. Once again, Washington football team. There's no wonder that people think the Washington football team will be good this year. That front four, once again, just a load of studs on that team, and they may have added some more pieces. They went kind of heavy on the defense drafting too. It's just the rich may be getting richer when you don't have that expensive quarterback, and they still got to find some things there. But this isn't about whatever they're going to end up being called. I hear they may be getting a mascot for next year. Maybe not this season, but we're talking about the Steelers. Let's see, against the run game as well. Steelers ninth when it comes to touchdown. Well, ninth, but tied for seventh. Looking at ProFootballReference.com, just in case anyone wants to take a look at some of these things and fact check me afterwards, by all means do so. 11th in rushing yards given up. And let me see, we already did overall first downs. Penalties, they were one of the more penalized defenses as well, believe it or not. Not that this really should be a shock to Steelers fans, right? And TJ Watt had made some comment the other day about the lack of holding calls. It's like, oh my goodness, if you were listening to this show at the beginning of last year with the season, through 4 weeks, man, we just knew something was off with that almost before anyone else really caught on. You could really complain about a game here, game there, bad referee experiences, complain about the Zebras. Maybe you feel something didn't go your way. They, last year, no matter what team you followed, they weren't calling holding to save their lives. You could have just ripped someone's jersey off of their back, and they may have looked the other way every single time. But regardless, and when we're talking about 103 penalties, they're tied with a few other teams here, like the Titans and the Lions, worst team, one of the worst defenses all last year. But even your Super Bowl champions, and both teams participating, 97 and 95 penalties overall. So there's still teams that get fairly penalized. There is some room for improvement with the Steelers defense, but I think the drop off from here isn't going to be quite what a lot of people feel it may be. And part of that is when you look at the depth chart, I think part of the problem with last year is this. The Steelers go on 11-0 tear. I've talked about the COVID rescheduling stuff, the playing the 13 games in a row because they were forced to take their bye in week 4 rather than when it was originally scheduled in week 8 following the Ravens and before playing the Cowboys, and that's why they looked sluggish. And then you lose Devin Bush week 6, game 5 against the Cleveland Browns. And when you lose a player like that, you got to understand it's along the same lines as what happened prior to everyone wanting and needing Devin Bush to be on this Steelers roster. And that was because Ryan Shazier was turning into a very premier player in the NFL. I want to say maybe even a Pro Bowl type guy. We saw the interceptions, the turnovers he was creating. He was capable of being a playmaker. And then all of a sudden, like anyone who's ever seen the movie The Usual Suspects, Kaiser Sose, and then he just disappears. You know what I mean? For that whole it just vanished. That whole center of the field became vulnerable for the Steelers. I don't want to say that about like just Shazier. Man, don't take those words the wrong way. What I'm trying to say is that presence that the Steelers had for many years, Shazier and then of course James Ferrier before, they had these same problems as well when Larry Foote went down in the early 2010s, the 2012, 2013 season. I think it was 2012 when they lost a whole bunch of starters there at the beginning of the year against the Titans in that home opener. And man, was that the last home opener the Steelers have had? Man, I think so. They were relying on was it Keon Wilson? Keon Wilson, was that his name? He didn't last very long, and they had just no presence in the middle of that field. They went and got Ryan Shazier. A lot of people made that type of criticism. Ryan Shazier, he should be playing safety. Oh, he's made of glass. But through those years, we saw the type of command he had on this defensive unit. And when he was lost, you saw that guys like Mark Barron, and I know I'm trying to think of the other gentleman's name. Came over from the Colts, but you had two shots at this. The Steelers were unable to draft anyone as a replacement right away, and then they took this situation into their own hands, traded up with the Denver Broncos to pick number 10 overall in order to draft Devin Bush as the future, as the centerpiece, as the defensive play caller, et cetera, et cetera. You go back to that 2017 season and how it was disappointing. Steelers are a 13-win team, win the division, potentially should have had they had a first-round bye, should have potentially been home field advantage throughout the whole playoffs as the 1 seed, but ended up as the 2 seed because Jesse caught it or didn't catch it, depending on your interpretation of that particular play. Shazier isn't there for a whole lot of this, and they started to get exposed, and the Jacksonville Jaguars most certainly did expose them in that divisional loss. It was ugly, and you had two more seasons where the Steelers kind of suffered through all of this, and eventually they get their guy with Devin Bush, and I'm trying to think, for the life of me, as I'm talking, I'm trying to find... Man, I can't even find this guy's name. I'm trying to find the other. John Bostic, that's who it was. And it didn't work out the same way. At the same time, the Steelers defense was trying to find itself. They were trying to find the edge rushers and everything like that. But the main centerpiece is this. We talk about how few starting quarterbacks there are in the NFL. We talk about when backup quarterbacks come in or backups of backups. This has the same kind of effect. Maybe not the biggest impact because quarterback by far the most important position, I believe, on any football team. But on the defense, you got your defensive play caller, your Ryan Shazier, your Devin Bush. Ryan Shazier that year didn't have his backup either. Tyler Matakevich was more a special teams player, but he was the chief backup that would have been coming in, the green dot on the helmet to get the radio information in from the sidelines, to call plays, to make adjustments, to communicate with your teammates and adjust the defense. Devin Bush lost 5th game of the season, week 5. Gets replaced. Cinderella story, really, when you think about it. Robert Spillane, undrafted. OMG, the Steelers are going to be in major trouble. No, they continue their winning ways. They go off. You have Spillane, like I said, Cinderella story, deflects a few passes. Who could forget causing Lamar Jackson his first ever career pick 6 as he just strolls that into the end zone in Baltimore. He also had one of the more highlight plays of the season against the Titans right before that, where he stood up Derrick Henry like a brick wall. Maybe he doesn't have the athletic measurables that you would like in a player, but there's something to be said sometimes for being in the right place at the right time and having the instincts, the know-how, etc. Just the intangibles, just the things that you cannot measure statistically or on paper to be able to perform at a high level in the NFL level. And Robert Spillane was able to do that in Devin Bush's stead. He did it, how many snaps we got here? About 30-ish against the Cleveland Browns. That's about half the game. Devin Bush, I think, went down in the early third quarter, if memory serves me correctly. Against the Titans, he plays 75%. He's on his way to playing 87% against the Ravens, 93 against the Cowboys, 69 against the Bengals. Yeah, there's a little bit of disparity here. They're trying to use Marcus Allen in some spots because Vince Williams, more of a run thumper, right? Blitzer, not much of a pass coverage guy. Robert Spillane, kind of in the same category as well. Whereas you get Devin Bush, Ryan Shazier style players move sideline to sideline very quickly. Speed, very important factor with the Steelers' base, either the base 3-4 or even the nickel package. That linebacker that's going to stay out there has got to be able to cover and got to be able to run the middle of the field. And what you end up having is you have a converted safety and Marcus Allen come in there. Sub packages, you're trying to guess run versus pass and getting the right personnel on the field versus having a singular hombre that's out there like Devin Bush. It's a 3-down guy, okay? Not only just a play caller, 3-down player, also the same thing. This is the reason why the Steelers moved on from Lawrence Timmons a few years ago. Lawrence Timmons was also, starting to age, 32, I think, when he went over to the Dolphins and kind of fell off the face of the map, man. And when you really think about it, always thought he was a tremendous player, but you had him playing alongside with Vince Williams. You have almost two clones of one another in those circumstances sometimes too. And that was one of the reasons I think they were looking to maybe move on from Vince Williams as well. The offseason, not just the cap number. The cap was a huge problem, don't get me wrong, with some of the off-season moves with the Steelers, but Robert Spillane pretty much does all the same things that Vince Williams does and does it cheaper. It's a business. So it's not to smite Vince Williams. I always feel that Vince Williams will always represent the black and gold uniform. He's always been a hard-hitting, hard-nosed, blue-collar, lunch pail type of linebacker that the Steelers have always coveted, and there will always be a place for somebody like that, albeit whether it's special teams and or some defensive snaps. That's why sometimes just looking around, I know this was a rant on Devin Bush, but there was a Bleacher Report article that ranked the Pittsburgh Steelers as the 11th best defense heading into 2021, and I got a couple of these that I cherry-picked for this specific conversation here on this episode. And to read this off, 2020 points allowed rank was third, and yards allowed rank was third. Exactly what I said. The Steelers were an elite defensive squad in 2020, but they will struggle to replicate that success again this year. Oh, really? The team needs to replace two top-notch defensive starters and edge rusher Bud Dupree, who signed a massive deal with the Titans. I'll be getting to him. And cornerback Mike Hilton, who got paid well by the rival Bengals. I'll be talking about him in a second, too. While the Steelers still have some excellent defenders like T.J. Watt under contract. Oh, they still have a few excellent defenders. It just cracks me up. More on this in a minute. They won't be as loaded on this side of the ball in 2021 because they lost Bud Dupree. See, this is what starts to really get under my skin when I read these type of things and how much some players play or don't play in a season. But this one's the bad one. This is the worst take of this. Aside from ranking the Browns, I think they have the Browns ranked third on this list. Linebacker Buddy Johnson, a 4th-round pick, is the most likely starter from their mediocre draft haul. Well, 6th-round selection Quincy Roche has potential on the edge, but may not even make the final roster. Who else is going to beat Roche out unless they sign someone else in the interim that's still sitting on the free agent pile? Buddy Johnson's the most likely starter. Are we talking about 2021 rankings or 2024 rankings? Because Buddy Johnson shouldn't even sniff a helmet. I just talked about Devin Bush, Vince Williams, and Robert Spillane. Those are the 3 inside linebackers for sure, if not Marcus Allen, that are going to have maybe a helmet on game day, and that's nothing against Buddy Johnson. Buddy Johnson, if he could prove himself to be a special teams player and make one of these other guys expendable, you got to look at what happened with Ulysses Gilbert. I understand he's been banged up, he's been injured often. Antoine Brooks, another one. These guys appeared in 2 games last year. Antoine Brooks played 28 snaps against the Bengals in Week 10, only 1 other snap against the Washington football team, sometimes inactive. Let me see. Not Spillane. Oh, I got some more things to say here. Even Tigray Scales got some action toward the end of the season, 3 snaps against the Colts. But Ulysses Gilbert, 14 snaps against Tennessee in Week 7, Week 14 against Buffalo. He got 19 for various reasons, whether or not that was just to work a man, get him healthy. Marcus Allen, he played quite a few games. He finally got in Week 8. He didn't play prior to that. On defense, just strictly speaking defense, 11 snaps, 4 snaps, 20. And, the average is usually, we'll just say about a ballpark of 60-ish when it comes to how many plays these guys are on the field. It all depends. That Ravens game was 82. The Cowboys game was 72. You see how that tires a team out. Washington football team, 72. 75 against the Bills, but then 56 against the Bengals, which is one of the lower, almost the lowest. The Steelers defense only had 47 plays against the Houston Texans, only ran 47 plays in week 3 as they absolutely turned that game around in the second half. But Marcus Allen plays, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games. He plays the final week 17 game against the Browns as well, on count of pretty much everyone kind of taking a breather for that one too. He had 100% participation in the game on the road against Cincinnati, 75% against the Bills. You're starting to see he played more because he was required to, because what happened was Robert Spillane, who ends up filling in for Devin Bush here, and this is the reason why the Buddy Johnson kind of thing is really blown out of proportion here by Bleacher Report. Oh, well, they didn't draft anyone else. This is going to suck. But they didn't have to. This group of players, did they need defensive linemen? No. I'm going to go through those guys. There's horses all up there. Did they need an edge rusher? No. They got their 2 guys. Could they have used maybe some help in the secondary, particularly maybe cornerback? But how high are you going to go with that type of pick? You don't need to go out and get another Devin Bush as far as your inside linebackers. You're not going to go get an edge rusher when your offense is screaming that you need a running back and that you need offensive linemen, that you need help with the offense. So why is why are they nitpicking on Johnson and Roche? If either of these guys ends up having a career, Vince Williams was the 6th round pick, then that's a win. If they don't, it's like nobody's going to remember it, and it's not going to affect anything otherwise. You got to really make sure the first few picks of this draft, like a Najee Harris, are home runs. If Najee Harris is a home run and Pat Freiermuth is, a double. I shouldn't use baseball terminology on a Pittsburgh show when the Pirates are the team that's representing the city. But regardless, you get my point here. You only need like maybe 2 of the draft picks, 3. If you're doing anything more than that, then you have the same problems that you were thinking about just a few months ago. TJ Watt getting the 5th-year option a year earlier. He's going to be heading into a contract. Can they keep Juju Smith-Schuster, James Conner, Say Levy, and Cam Sutton? Those are the top 4 picks because that was an excellent draft by Kevin Colbert. So getting back to this, Marcus Allen ends up coming in. Robert Spillane is now filling in for Devin Bush. He's got the green dot in most cases. He is playing 75, 87, 93, 69, nice, 84, 81% of the snaps. If you haven't been following us long enough, we do get juvenile sometimes. That's through week 12. That's through that extra Ravens game. Everything gets thrown out the window. Baby with the bathwater. The 5 days rest against the Washington football team. Their first loss this season. He only plays 29% of the snaps. 21 total out of that 72. These guys are overworked. They're getting hurt. He misses the last 4 games of the year. This is Robert Spillane, the backup defensive quarterback. Play caller. Now you got to go to Avery Williamson, who has only been playing in 2 games prior to this. And then, of course, this being the 3rd game that he would be active for. Let me make sure I got this right. Okay, maybe 4 games. So week 9, trade deadline, Avery Williamson comes in November 1st. November 1st. He's a veteran player, but he's still in the same mold of Vince Williams and Robert Spillane. He's not a Devin Bush. At least the Steelers recognized that after Bush went on injured reserve, that they needed a little more depth there because Ulysses Gilbert couldn't stay. He just can't stay healthy. The guy's had some back issues over the last few years. Williamson just kind of gets his beak wet a little bit here, to use a little bit of a mafia term, the beak wet. Not quite the made man yet. 11 snaps, 8 snaps, and then 25, that's almost half against the Ravens, and then 38 plays about half. He gets into kind of a rotation with the Washington football team. That's because Vince Williams also gets hurt and doesn't play against the Buffalo Bills and the Cincinnati Bengals either. Steelers are not only down Devin Bush, not only down his replacement Robert Spillane, but then they're also down Vince Williams for against the Bills and the Bengals. Do we see that? Are you seeing the blueprint that I'm laying out here? No team can be undefeated against injuries. And you're going to say, Joe, what if so-and-so gets hurt this year? Name me any position on any team where if somebody gets hurt, more than likely it's going to be a problem. There are very few instances that are like that. I think if somebody, knock on wood here, one of the Steelers wide receivers gets hurt, okay, they got some extra depth there. If you go to somebody like the Browns or the Ravens and one of the running backs gets dinged and they have to go, instead of J.K. Dobbins, they go with Gus Edwards, or instead of Nick Chubb, they go with Kareem Hunt. Okay, I get it. But in most cases, you lose a quarterback, you lose this guy or that guy. It's hard to make up for that regardless. Fielding 22 starters, you kind of almost kick that out to 23 or 24 in some of these different defensive, offensive schemes. A slot corner, a slot wide receiver. Okay, I get it. We're talking about that with Mike Hilton too. But they lost so many of the inside guys here, and you get ranked 11th by Bleacher Report despite they had their losses here because they have legitimate losses on the field. Like, what the heck are they supposed to do? Let's see. Vikings, Broncos, Giants. Browns were 7th on this list. Dolphins are 6th. Baltimore Ravens end up 5th. Patriots 4th. That's on account of free agency. Washington football team 3rd. Rams 2nd. And the Buccaneers Super Bowl champs. Okay, I can handle most of the top 5. I don't have a problem with that. I think the Ravens, they lose Matt Judon. They always find a way the same way. Their front office to cycle in some young players here. The Browns have quite a few young players and some free agents, and we're going to have to see how that gels together. I've been ragging on them pretty bad, but it's more at the slighting of the Steelers and their defense, where we've got some proven commodities. Devin Bush coming back immediately changes the whole narrative. We forget about what he did against the Los Angeles Chargers, don't want to call him San Diego anymore, when his rookie year, because Minkah Fitzpatrick came along and was just this huge stud and made us forget that Kevin Colbert gave up a little bit, moved up in the draft, and got this guy, because then he gave up unprecedented. The Steelers give away a first-round pick in order to get an all-pro safety, of whom is another one of these excellent defenders still on the team. Just TJ Watt, just a guy that's been in the running 2 years in a row for Defensive Player of the Year, and probably should have gotten it both times. 15 sacks last year, 14 and a half before, however many forced fumbles. I know the year before he had like 8 in 16 games. What did TJ have last year? I've got it here. Oh, I had it here. Gotta love when this all locks up. So 2 forced fumbles last year. Still had a pick. How does he and Alex Highsmith end up with interceptions? That's pretty crazy. That's pretty wild to me. But I'm jumping around. Devin Bush is definitely the biggest addition, one of the missing pieces. The Steelers defense was already great. Without him, they get him back. They add him to this. So when you're talking about, well, they only added Buddy Johnson, that's baloney. Like, why are we talking about him? Devin Bush is a centerpiece. This is a guy that could be a Pro Bowl or All-Pro level player. He's still rather young, and he's acting as though he's off the reservation on his social media. I don't care. He's going to be self-motivated, and he may very well murder someone out there on the field this year. The way Vince Williams sounds like he's pretty fired up already. These guys are just chomping at the bit to play some football. I've been talking about the inside linebackers a little bit too much. Let's kick out to the outside linebackers. You've heard me on this show talk so many times already about Alex Highsmith, because I just get so annoyed with all the talk about Jadeveon Clowney and how he's going to turn the Browns completely around, and I'm just not buying that. It's one of these things, I go absolutely haywire listening to this take. And the last 8 games that Jadeveon Clowney played 8 games last year. Sorry, I'm kind of losing my train of thought here as I look for the statistic I'm always telling you about. I'm comparing Alex Highsmith with Jadeveon Clowney, former first overall pick of the draft. And Highsmith, I got it here, 33 tackles. Out of 8 games, it took Highsmith's last 8 games, of which only 5 of those was he a starter. Okay. The other 3 games, Bud Dupree was still playing, so Highsmith was in a rotation. And Clowney plays only 8 games, period, the entire year for the Tennessee Titans last year. So I took Highsmith's final 8 games because it includes his 5 starts. And Highsmith has 33 tackles, 3 of them for loss, to Clowney's 19 and 4 for a loss. 2 sacks to Clowney's 0, 5 quarterback hits to Clowney's 6. And the most telling thing here is Highsmith only played 44 snaps in those first 3 games to Bud Dupree's 137. He had a total in those 8 games of 343 to Clowney's 426. So he's about 80 snaps fewer, almost a full game fewer with better production. And people were talking about, well, the Steelers need to sign Justin Houston. All this other stuff. You have on the other side, I don't even have to talk about TJ Watt. An excellent defender still on the roster, still under contract. Very generous of Bleacher Reports to say that. Should be Defensive Player of the Year. Last 2 years. Come on, seriously. It's driving a nerve, probably even more than Jesse caught it because it's more fresh in my mind. But you've got that guy on one side of the field, and you've got Alex Highsmith, who, believe it or not, you're never going to believe this. Pro Football Focus, the Wizards at PFF, ranked their defenses, and they ranked the Steelers number 1. Holy cow. These are the guys where you got PFF Sam that really strongly dislikes Ben Roethlisberger, but he really likes the defensive line. I'm going to read this to you. One would think that Pittsburgh's defensive line is slated to take a step back after replacing Bud Dupree with Alex Highsmith. That step might not be as large as many expect. I love this. I only just read this like a couple of hours ago, by the way. I'm not sure when this was published, but it was published last month. I don't know how I missed this. I almost see all this stuff. But that step might not be as large as many expected because Highsmith finished his rookie season with a higher pass rush win rate, 16.5%, than Dupree's 13.7, almost 3 full percentage points higher. He joins a group that already features TJ Watt, and I haven't even gotten into the defensive line, but let's say it. Grown-ass man Cam Hayward, who was kind of in the lead or leading it. He had an off year for sacks. Only 4 sacks last year for Cam, the grown-ass man, Hayward. He had 19 quarterback hits, though. Stephon Tuitt had 25 quarterback hits and 11 sacks. Tyson Alualu, maybe not the big flashy numbers, but he's eating up double teams. He's still got 2 sacks. He got to the quarterback 5 times, 4 tackles for loss. These 3 guys up front. You got Chris Wormley for depth, who was brought back. Very quiet free agent re-signing. I think he was a little banged up last year. We may not have seen his full potential, but I'll still take the veteran in that place versus just that's where you could really complain about maybe a later round pick. I understand they went and got Isaiah Loudermilk. I don't expect Isaiah Loudermilk to be active on game days this year. I think that's somebody to develop that's in very much the same body type, prototype as a Hayward or Tuitt. Will he live up to being either one of those guys? I'm not going to venture a guess on that just yet, but Hayward and Tuitt are monsters. TJ Watt is a monster. Alu coming back is huge in the center of that defensive line. This unit does not give up a whole lot of run yards. This unit gets to the quarterback the most. Alex Highsmith is absolutely, even that small window, that flash that we saw, he is not a rookie now. He is an experienced player entering his second year who was already a starter. If we thought that Dupree was a slow starter and we still saw the Steelers' defense handle their business without Dupree having his coming out party, which, by the way, that coming out party, it all started when Joey Porter was not brought back as the outside linebackers coach. Jerry Osavsky, he's a lifer. He's a Youngstown guy like me, too. But Osavsky, the inside linebackers coach, and whatever other hats he's worn and being a player and everything else. But Joey Porter had taken over as Keith Butler became the defensive coordinator. This was Keith Butler's area. Now Keith Butler said, I'm going to wear 2 caps, and I'm going to take back over the edge rushers, and Dupree, boom. It's like you put the rocket pack on him, and he shot to the moon. And that's what I'm seeing with Alex Highsmith already. This is the reason why I'm high on Highsmith. I think Highsmith is being downplayed a little too much. We saw what happened in the wild card game when he got hurt and they had to put Cassius Marsh out there. The Browns are already sitting on a lead What else do you have to do if you've got that lead and you want to protect it? You run the football, you choose some clock, and you run it right at Cassius Marsh because it's the same thing. When a player goes down in the NFL, sharks smell the blood in the water, and they're circling. And that's exactly what you got to do. That's exactly what competent coaching should do. In most cases, should be able to make up for that, you would hope, but you're going 3 deep, and that's yet another reason why you had the disappointment, frustration that you did and that you see. And when it's the last thing that you remember, you tend to get ratings like 11 over almost in the middle of the pack for this Steelers defense, which I don't think is fair. I've already talked about this whole front 7 pretty much. Is there any depth I should talk about besides the guys I've already mentioned? I did mention, I don't know, Carlos Davis, Isaiah Buggs. I think they're fighting for the same roster spots. Henry Mondow, Isaiah Loudermilk. There's only going to be a few of these spots available. Maybe one of them goes to the practice squad. I think the Steelers could use maybe some more edge depth. We'll see who they can maybe find, somebody that gets cut out of another camp or something of that nature that could help just come in and give Highsmith a breather. Will Roche do that as a rookie? I don't know. We're going to have to see what he does in camp. So it's a fair criticism, but it's not indicative of what the starters are going to be like here. Vince Williams, Marcus Allen, Ulysses Gilbert, the rest of these guys, I mean, even Tigre Scales, he's like he's going to be fighting for his life to make the roster, which I don't see happening. And then apologize if you hear some of the impending storm coming here. By hook or by crook, I'm going to get a show to you guys before the end of the week, and just nothing is ever working out my way. Everybody's more worried about the secondary. I understand it. Joe Hayden is a year older. Joe Hayden, 32 now. I'm going to verify. I don't want to make him older than what he is. Yeah, I turned 32 in April. I thought so. Father Time could catch up. That could happen. It's scary to see what's all behind these guys, but I think Cam Sutton was my priority as far as free agent signings are concerned. So he's going to get a shot, I believe, on the outside. You see some tentative depth charts. They're trying to pencil Justin Lane in as an outside corner. Sutton can play anywhere. He can play safety too if need be. I think that's what makes him a good outside corner or even a nickel back, and that's why I'm not. If he ends up in this position and you end up trying to cycle Justin Lane, Arthur Mallette, or James Pierre, we've lived through Artie Burns and Ross Cockrell's. Yeah, I know. Everybody rolling the eyes, shaking your head, but you can't do much worse than what some of those guys were doing, and the Steelers' defense was still pretty solid. Am I right? I don't have the same amount of concern. I think Cam Sutton is a player capable of making splash plays. All of the things I said earlier about Robert Spillane and having football instinct and being in the right place, right time, forcing fumbles, picking up the ball, kind of the Minka Fitzpatrick type factor here. You don't see this with Terrell Edmunds because Terrell Edmunds just plays a role that's very similar to other safeties before him, where he's not really sent to blitz. He's more of a run-stopping guy. He's going to make a lot of tackles. He's always in a position where he's going to get an interception. I don't think he's a bum by any means. A lot of people still like to think, well, they could have got him in the 3rd round. No, that's just nonsense. So just stop with that. Tackling machine, 8 passes defensed. That's 1 more than Mike Hilton had last year. Joe Hayden had 12. He led the team. 11 from Minka Fitzpatrick. If you even want to go to Steven Nelson, had 9. So he still gets the job done. And I think he's getting better. I don't think he's a weak link on the defense. It's just a matter of whether Sutton's going to play inside or outside. I know we were talking about Shakur Brown, undrafted, Michigan State, a guy that probably should have been drafted. Different reasons why he wasn't. Trey Norwood was drafted in the 7th round. You got Antoine Brooks, who was drafted the year before in the 6th round. We've heard Mike Tomlin talk about versatility, Swiss Army knife with some of these players. He announced Trey Norwood specifically as that. We've heard him talk about this with Antoine Brooks. Miles Killebrew comes over, free agent. Safety experience, linebacker experience from the Lions. We're going to have a hodgepodge of any of these names to replace a guy that nobody knew anything about 3 years ago that was undrafted, college free agent, street free agent, comes to camp, becomes a camp phenom, wins a starting spot. He earns all of our love and respect in Mike Hilton, gets himself a nice contract with the Bengals. Am I going to miss him? Yes. Is he replaceable? Also, yes. I don't want to downplay the importance of the Steelers playing nickel. A lot of times, 2/3 of the game. But Mike Hilton, 62, 71, 79%, 81%, 39, misses 4 games in the middle. Titans, Ravens, Cowboys, Bengals. Steelers still win all of those games. They did have Cam Sutton playing in that spot rather than Steven Nelson. Steven Nelson misses a game after this Washington football team. I'm not going to say that's the Washington football team and pass game was not the real reason why the Steelers lost that game. So we don't need to draw any conclusions there. I'm going to miss Steven Nelson. I'm not going to lie. I thought he was the glove. I think Sutton has the potential to be the same player and perhaps may have a higher ceiling because I think we know who Nelson is and we don't quite know who Sutton is yet. But I think his floor is every bit as good as Nelson. But jumping back to Hilton, misses 4 games, 36, 54, 79, 79, 50, 61. 50 and 61, that's the Bengals and the Colts games toward the end of the year, 37% against Cleveland Browns in the wild card game. He only plays 45% of the snaps for the entire year, but he does miss out on a whole lion's share of them, missing a quarter of the season, of which they got a glimpse to see what life might be like without him if they couldn't afford. They already had these inklings. They were trying to get some contract things done. He was still like restricted rights, free agent, things of those nature the previous offseason. So they kind of had these things in play and they had their eye on the ball, so to speak, if they were to lose Mike Hilton prior. That does it bother me? Not as much as it probably should bother some people. And still, when you're putting on a 5'10", whatever guy, 5'11" guy, sometimes on a tight end, running backs, you're creating some mismatches there in the corner versus just a regular slot corner. He had a lot of tenacity. He had some of the athletic prowess. He could get up there. I love Mike Hilton. Speed off the edge as far as blitzing, but again, let's not try and kid ourselves too much. Nickel corner, how important in the whole grand scheme of things. You got the base 3-4 guys that are already there. We're going to find out if there's any other who's going to try and factor into this. They could do the same thing they did last year where they would slide. They brought in Justin Lane to try this, and Justin Lane then got replaced by James Pierre. Maybe not a good sign for Justin Lane's development. He was a 3rd-round pick. We're going to have to see what kind of pedigree he has and if he can parlay that into an actual starting role here in the pros. We have not seen that materialize yet. James Pierre, another unheard of guy that could come out there, and will it be a Band-Aid? It might be. It might not be the most comfortable thing in the world, but to think that the Steelers otherwise, Pro Football Focus thinks they're number 1 over Washington football team, Buccaneers, the Rams, and the Eagles. I don't know that I saw the Eagles otherwise. CBS Sports ranked them as Washington football team 1st, Bucs 2nd, Browns 3rd, get out of town, Ravens 4th, Steelers 5th. But just even in saying that, AFC North is going to be a very competitive division. The Steelers are going to be able to compete. And I didn't even really talk about Minkah Fitzpatrick being the best safety in the league. I haven't even talked about TJ Watt being maybe the best defensive player in the entire National Football League. In fact, you have 2 of the best defensive players in the entire National Football League in Minkah Fitzpatrick and TJ Watt. And you're not thinking that they're going to be able to I don't see teams putting up 30 points on the Steelers every week. You may get an instance where there's a shootout, maybe guys are tired, maybe there's an injury or something like that. But this defense is still, it's built for the long haul here and to help support the offense. If the offense gets their act together and isn't 3 and out all the time where they put these guys on the field, it's not going to matter if you need to replace, sounds like The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. It doesn't matter if you need to replace Mike Hilton. It doesn't matter. Know your role, jabroni. That's exactly what I'm trying to say to all the people who are downplaying the Pittsburgh Steelers this season, because I think their defense is still going to be one of the top 5 in the league. Minkah Fitzpatrick, TJ Watt, Devin Bush, Cam Hayward, Stephon Tuitt. Alex Highsmith may make a name for himself out of this too. Tyson Alualu is definitely understated. I think it really hinges on, it doesn't even hinge on Cam Sutton and what they figure out with the corners. Cam Sutton's going to be fine. I'm just hoping that Joe Hayden has that fountain of youth, and he is still the player he has been through his tenure as a Pittsburgh Steeler, because if he's a Pro Bowl level player on that one side of the field, there's going to be no concerns coming from me. The other thing, of course, is Joe Hayden's got to play 17 games this year. That doesn't always happen, unfortunately, either. What can you say? I think injuries are a part of football, unfortunately, and the Steelers were still able to deal. I think Hayden, he had the COVID thing that happened at the end of the year. That's why he sat out both Browns games. He didn't even play them. He missed only one other game the rest of the season, and I'm not exactly sure. Holy smokes. Well, that'll do it for us, folks. Just hoping I don't get lights flickering and power going out. But the Thunder's coming. The Lightning's coming. That sounds like a good anthem for the Steelers defense this year. Cue up Renegade. I'm excited. I'm waiting for some football. I seriously can't wait. I'm going to read you what CBS Sports said because it's the only one I did not. Losing Bud Dupree hurts. Alex Highsmith did a solid job filling in last season. The Steelers picked up Quincy Roche in the 6th round. He should help as well. He was underrated in the pre-draft process due to his being the 3rd best University of Miami edge guy in this class. Okay, all right, I'll take it. Pittsburgh is also still just loaded with talent at all 3 levels with TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Stephon Tuitt. Sound like a broken record here. Tyson Lulu, Devin Bush, Vince Williams, Joe Hayden, Minka Fitzpatrick, Terrell Edmonds, Cam Sutton, and Justin Lane all returning from last year's team. There's just second unit depth. Only real concern is second unit depth, which has been sapped by the team's cap constraints over these past few years. Maybe if they were trying to bring back Hilton and Dupree, those hurt. That might be a more true statement, particularly this past season. But I think the core group of players is here in order to make the run that they need to run. Let's hope that everyone else has got their stuff together. Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Steel City Underground podcast. As always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for supporting the program, the platform, and everything else that's out here. Don't forget about that Chase Claypool camp. The last push for that coming right around the corner. Training camp coming. Hall of Fame game coming. Hall of Fame inductions coming. We have some real football. We only have a few more weeks, and we're going to have all kinds of excitement to talk about, including training camp as players report, start practicing. We start to see all this stuff in action. I'm excited about it, and you should be too. My name's Joe, and as always, we encourage everyone out there who's still listening, our favorite 2%ers, each and every time 2%ers, just, this isn't practice what we preach. I always encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.